You've heard every single one of these phrases from someone you trusted, probably more than once, probably in moments when you were already vulnerable enough that the words landed before you had time to examine them, and long after the friendship revealed itself for what it was, long after the distance grew or the betrayal arrived or the relationship simply hollowed out until there was nothing left worth protecting. Some of those phrases are still running in the background, still shaping how you read yourself. That's not an accident. That's architecture. Nietzsche wrote in Human, All Too Human, published in 1878, that the most dangerous influence a person can have on another is not the one that arrives as an attack. It is the one that arrives as concern, as loyalty, as the voice that sounds, for a long time, indistinguishable from the voice of someone who actually wants good things for you. This video is about learning to hear the difference. If you have ever looked back on a friendship and understood, only afterward, that something was being taken from you the entire time, give this video a like right now. Because what follows is going to name it with a precision that most people spend years without. 1. I'm only saying this because I care about you. This is the phrase that disarms before the blow lands. What it does, structurally, is pre-install your response. By framing what's coming as an act of love, it makes any resistance you might feel to the content seem like ingratitude for the care. You're not being criticized. You're being gifted with honesty that lesser friends wouldn't have the courage to offer. That's the framing. And because it arrives before the actual content, your defenses are already compromised by the time the real message comes through. Robert Cialdini's research on influence documented this mechanism with precision. In his landmark work on persuasion, he identified what he called the liking principle, the finding that human beings are significantly more likely to comply with requests, accept criticism, and absorb negative information from people they believe genuinely care about them. Fake friends exploit this principle, not necessarily through calculation, but through an intuitive understanding that warmth is the most effective delivery system for control. Nietzsche would have identified this as a specific expression of what he called the morality of pity. The use of the language of care to assert power over another person's choices, self-image, and direction. The person saying, "I'm only saying this because I care," is not wrong that they care. But what they care about, if you examine what follows that phrase over time, is almost never your liberation. It is your proximity, your dependence, your continued need for the reassurance that only they are honest enough to provide. The test is simple, and Nietzsche's framework makes it clear. Does the feedback that follows this phrase consistently make you more capable and more free, or does it consistently return you to a version of yourself that requires their guidance to navigate? 2. I don't want to say anything, but 5 words that guarantee something will be said that the speaker has been wanting to say for longer than this moment. The structure of this phrase is a performance of reluctance that functions as permission. By announcing that they don't want to say it, the speaker positions themselves as someone being dragged toward honesty against their better instincts. A reluctant truth-teller rather than someone who has been waiting for the right moment to deliver information that serves their purposes. What typically follows, "I don't want to say anything but," is one of 3 things. Something designed to introduce doubt about a relationship you have outside theirs, something designed to undermine a decision you've already made, or something designed to return your attention and dependency to them at a moment when it has been drifting elsewhere. Goffman's work on impression management identified this kind of rhetorical framing as one of the most common features of strategic social interaction. The explicit performance of a virtue, reluctance, honesty, courage, that works precisely because the performance is more convincing than a direct statement would be. If they simply said what they wanted to say, you might push back. But if they announce their own reluctance first, pushing back requires you to argue against someone who didn't even want to have this conversation. Nietzsche described this pattern in Beyond Good and Evil when he wrote about what he called the mendacity of the weak. The way people who cannot pursue their interests directly become extraordinarily skilled at pursuing them indirectly, through the grammar of virtue rather than the vocabulary of desire. 3. You've changed. 3 words, delivered with a specific weight, in a specific tone, at a specific moment, usually the moment when you have begun to move in a direction that no longer centers the person saying them. This phrase functions as a social correction. It invokes the version of you that existed before whatever change is currently underway. A version that was presumably more available, more compliant, more focused on the relationship, more likely to remain in the configuration they had become accustomed to. And by naming the change, it introduces the possibility that the change is a problem, that the old version was better, that you should interrogate what you're becoming rather than simply becoming it. Nietzsche was direct about this in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Zarathustra is told, repeatedly and by people who claim to love him, that he has changed, that the descent from the mountain has made him different, harder to reach, less like who he was. And Nietzsche's response through the character is unambiguous. Yes, that is the point. Becoming requires becoming different. And the people who need you to stay the same are revealing in that need that their investment is in the you that served them rather than the you that is emerging. Growth, by definition, disrupts existing arrangements. The people who genuinely want good things for you absorb that disruption without making it your problem. The people whose interest in you is primarily structural, who need you at a particular level, in a particular configuration, to serve a particular function in their lives, experience your growth as a threat and deliver that experience as concern. Think about the last time someone told you that you'd changed, and ask yourself honestly, were they describing a loss for you, or a loss for them? Comment below. Growth is not betrayal. Just that. Because the people who need to read that sentence will know exactly why. 4. I was just joking. The most efficient retraction in the social lexicon. What makes this phrase so effective as a tool is that it is deployed retroactively. After the content has already landed, after the image has already been planted, after the laugh has already been had by everyone in the room at your expense. The joke did its work. And now the joker gets to keep the result while eliminating the accountability. If you react, you have no sense of humor. If you push back, you're being oversensitive about something that wasn't serious. If you try to name what actually happened, you're reconstructing a moment that has already been officially reclassified as harmless. The discomfort you feel is yours to manage. The comment that produced it has been dissolved. Clinical psychologists who document patterns of relational control identify this as one of the primary features of covert hostility. Hostility that requires deniability to function. The attack needs a cover that is always available and always socially acceptable. Humor provides that cover more reliably than almost anything else because the audience is already laughing, which means the audience has already agreed, which means any objection from you is now also an objection to the room. Nietzsche wrote in Human, All Too Human about the specific cruelty that lives inside social humor, the way wit, at its most malicious, functions as violence with an escape hatch. The person who is consistently the target of a friend's jokes, who is consistently reassured that the jokes are affectionate, who consistently feels something wrong but cannot name it without being accused of humorlessness, is not being oversensitive. They are being accurately calibrated to a dynamic that requires their silence to continue. 5. I just want what's best for you. Almost identical in structure to the first phrase, but deployed in different circumstances, specifically the circumstances in which you are about to make a decision, pursue a direction, or establish a limit that the speaker finds threatening. What makes this phrase so effective is that it is almost certainly true at some level in most cases. They do want what's best for you. They also want what's best for them. And in the geography of a friendship that has become extractive, those two things have quietly become synonymous in the speaker's mind. What's best for you is what keeps you available, what keeps you close, what keeps you from moving in directions that leave them behind. John Bowlby's research on attachment documented how early experiences of connection shape the way people regulate proximity to others throughout their lives, what he called anxious attachment, the relational pattern in which closeness is pursued through control rather than genuine security, produces adults who experience another person's autonomy as abandonment and frame their management of that autonomy as care. The fake friend who says, "I just want what's best for you," while consistently steering you back toward choices that serve their needs, is not lying about the care. The care is real, what they cannot see, and what Nietzsche would have identified as the core of the problem, is that the care has been organized around their fear of losing you rather than around any accurate understanding of what you actually need to become. This channel exists outside the algorithm. No sponsorships, no brand deals. Just research, writing, and the belief that ideas sharp enough to change how you see yourself are worth protecting. If this is giving you language for something you've lived through, a relationship that took years to fully understand, consider supporting this work directly through the link in the description. Every contribution keeps this independent, and that independence is what makes this kind of honesty possible. 6. You know I'd never hurt you. This one is delivered specifically in the moment after the hurt has already occurred. Its function is not reassurance, its function is reframing. By invoking their intention, their character, their fundamental orientation toward you, it shifts the focus of the conversation away from what they did and toward who they are. And who they are, in their account, is someone incapable of the thing you just experienced, which means the thing you just experienced must be something other than what it appeared to be. This is the grammatical structure of what clinical psychology describes as gaslighting, the systematic destabilization of another person's reading of their own experience. Not always through dramatic denial, sometimes through the much quieter substitution of their narrative for yours. You felt hurt. They would never hurt you. Therefore, your feeling requires re-examination rather than their behavior. Nietzsche, in Beyond Good and Evil, wrote about what he called the self-deception of the noble, the way people who have constructed flattering narratives about their own character become genuinely incapable of seeing when their behavior contradicts those narratives. The person saying, "You know I'd never hurt you," may not be consciously manipulating you. They may have simply built an interior story about themselves that has no room for the evidence you are presenting, which does not make the impact on you any less real, and which does not mean you are required to reorganize your experience around their self-image. 7. No one else would tell you the truth like I do. The final phrase, and the most revealing one, because it isn't about you at all. It is entirely about them. What this sentence constructs is a monopoly. It positions the speaker as the singular source of honest engagement in your life. The one friend brave enough, close enough, honest enough to say what everyone else is too polite or too afraid to say. Which means that if you lose this relationship, you lose access to honesty itself. You are left with only the comfortable lies of people who don't care enough to tell you the real thing. Nietzsche spent an enormous portion of Thus Spoke Zarathustra examining the psychology of people who position themselves as indispensable. Zarathustra is warned again and again that he needs guides, interpreters, intermediaries, people who understand the path better than he does and without whom he will go wrong. And Nietzsche's response through Zarathustra is one of his most consistent philosophical positions. The path toward genuine self-development cannot be mediated by someone else's account of it. The moment someone else becomes the authority on what is real for you, something essential has been surrendered. "No one else would tell you the truth like I do" is the sentence of someone who needs to be your only mirror. Because as long as they are your only mirror, you will only ever see what they choose to show you. Now let's close this with the honesty the topic requires. 7 phrases. You have heard most of them. And reading through this list, you probably felt the specific weight of specific memories. Particular conversations, particular moments, particular people whose voices these sentences belong to in your recollection. That weight is information, not evidence of weakness, not proof that you are naive. Information about what was actually happening in a relationship while you were trying to make it work, trying to give the benefit of the doubt, trying to be the kind of person who doesn't assume the worst about people they care about. Nietzsche's most demanding philosophical argument was not about other people. It was about the requirement to know yourself clearly enough that other people's accounts of you, however confidently delivered, however wrapped in the language of care, do not become the primary text of your own life. The person who knows themselves does not need the friend who is the only one honest enough to tell them the truth. They have already developed the capacity to locate it themselves. That capacity is not built in relationships that drain it. It is built in exactly the kind of honest examination that makes those relationships visible for what they are. 2 questions for you in the comments. First, which of these 7 phrases has lived in you the longest? The one that still surfaces in moments of doubt, still sounds like a voice that belongs to someone who cared about you. Second, have you ever used any of these phrases yourself? And what were you actually trying to protect in that moment? Leave it below. The honest answers are the ones that mean something. And if this kind of examination is work you want to continue, the slow, precise dismantling of the language that has been used to make you smaller than you are, subscribe. Because the next video goes into territory that connects directly to what this one opened. The friends worth keeping are the ones who make you more capable of living without them.